So now having Paul McDonnell from Dublin Web Summit.
Hey guys, so yeah, I'm Paul. I'm the startup director at the Web Summit, which we just had last week. It was about 5 degrees in Dublin. I think it's like about 20 degrees here, so straight away Lisbon is kind of on the competitive scale of the tech conference scene. So basically what I'm going to talk about today is kind of 2 tech communities I'm involved in for the last kind of 5 years or so. So the first one is the startup kind of community that we have at the Web Summit that we've kind of developed over the last 4 years or so. And the other one is the Dublin Web Summit on a broader spectrum that's essentially been developing for the last kind of 4 decades from the kind of highest level down. So this map is what kind of the general Dublin area looked like in the kind of late 70s. So the IDA, which is the Irish Development Authority, focused on bringing in some kind of hardware big hitters from the US. And their FDI really focused on B2B enterprises. So it was all kind of companies that you'd associated with kind of old tech, Intel, Dell, Microsoft. And this kind of went hand in hand with a lot of focus on STEM subjects, on second level education. This is essentially Ireland 2.0. So in the late 90s, there's more of a focus on STEM subjects and third level education. The workforce is more highly trained. The kind of groundwork has been set by all the B2B guys, and the smaller guys who are more focused on kind of consumer-facing products really joined the Dublin ecosystem. So you have people like eBay, Facebook, Engineer, PayPal, all these companies that have gone on to define their respective industries, really joining the race, and kind of seeing Dublin as more of an attractive place to do business, obviously for a variety of reasons. So in the kind of, this is essentially a bubble of 2 years, and we've seen just an absolutely, a big explosion in the kind of, especially American companies locating in Ireland. So pretty much any major tech company that you can imagine from the Valley has a de facto Dublin office at this stage. So you see LinkedIn, you see Twitter, Etsy, Zynga, Dropbox, all these kind of companies that they really would be the heavy hitters of Silicon Valley, have located in Ireland. And it's for a number of reasons. Obviously, tax being one, a highly educated workforce being another one. But there's also, from the kind of ground up of the big guys coming in and the initial layer, there's a real kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I think, in Dublin, and the kind of outlying cities. And I think that goes hand in hand with what we've done at the Web Summit. We've seen these kind of clusters of either consumer-facing products or, in the early 70s, pharma companies, but all have a kind of tech at their cornerstones, and they've really essentially made Dublin what it is today in terms of our economy. So the Dublin tech scene is kind of made out of, it's kind of thrived across 5 different factors. So on the left here we have the facilitators, which are the incubators, the accelerators. The guys that really kind of coordinate all the efforts of the startups. So we have a couple of really good ones. We've got Dogpatch, NDRC, and Wayra. And then we have some really specialized incubators like Health Excel there that I think is a very good kind of indicator of where a tech society is going. If you have specialized incubators, it really kind of kicks on the startup scene and makes it really competitive. Why would you go to Silicon Valley when you have a health incubator on your doorstep, and it's an internationally renowned one? The public factor plays a big part in the Dublin tech scene, and the IDA and Enterprise Ireland are both very active. I think generally speaking, the Irish government gets a lot of stick, but these 2 organisations do a lot of good work, both in bringing Irish startups abroad, and in the case of the IDA, bringing a lot of European startups and further afield startups to Dublin to set up their offices. So they've both done great work in the last couple of years. Down the bottom, we have the rising stars and the titans. So the titans, I guess, are the integral kind of motivating factor for a lot of Dublin startups. You see people like PCH, Liam Casey, who would be one of Apple's biggest partners, Paddy Power, the biggest international online bookmaker, RealX, which processes something like 24 billion in payments every year online. So these are the guys who really lay the groundwork for companies like the Rising Stars to really take over, companies like DataHug and Log Entries, and TrustDev more recently that just closed around at 3 million. So it's these companies that I guess people are looking towards for the next generation of success. And then in the top right, to follow on with Irish stereotypes, we've got free drink. So there's any amount of meetups in Dublin every day of the week. There's a huge amount of very targeted ones. So there's a meetup for Node.js developers, which if that's not a niche, I don't know what is. We kind of run the pub summits, which I'll get onto in a second. But what I kind of want to touch on is an article that came out last week that I think is one of the kind of main dangers facing startups internationally today, and it's the whole kind of unicorn club that was in TechCrunch last week, an article by Cowboy Ventures, and it's this kind of view that if you're setting up a startup, you have to be the next Facebook. I think the guys defined a unicorn as a company that since 2003 has gone on to become worth in excess of $1 billion, or in the case of Facebook, a super unicorn valued in excess of 100 billion. So they said that 0.07% of companies actually reach that status. If you read into it, it's 0.07% of venture-backed consumer and enterprise startups. So it's an absolute minute figure of companies, and I think Irish startups have kind of learned to embrace the donkeyness. Like there's some incredibly profitable companies coming out of Ireland, but they know that they have to put in the work. They know that realistically, one out of the country possibly might make the statue of something like a Facebook or like a Twitter. So they're more realistic. They put in the work, and I think they're more targeted as a result. So we see a kind of hub of health startups coming out. We see a hub of music startups like Soundwave and fan footage. So all these kind of companies are a little bit more realistic in their expectations, and I think that's, if anything, it's a strength. It's not, to say that these guys can't compete with the Valley. They can, but on a much smaller scale, and they're more realistic about it. So to go on to the Web Summit, this kind of gives you an idea of where the company was about 4 years ago. So we had this couch at the summit last week, and it's the couch that was our office for about 2 years. So our founder, Paddy Cosgrave, set up the Web Summit and essentially built it into a pretty good conference in the first year. In the second year, we had a substantial amount of growth, and since then, we've kind of become the biggest tech conference in Europe and one of the biggest startup gatherings in the world. So there are some figures on our growth. In terms of the most kind of important statistics, I think the 500 attendees to 10,000 is pretty interesting. And then our startup exhibitors kind of represent a bit of a pivot that we've done in building our startup community out. So we've gone from 3 in our first year, all Irish guys, to 900 this year from over 100 different countries. So it's kind of, it represents a focus that we have in more kind of startup culture, but also it's replicated at the conference in a lot of fragmented groups. So people kind of look at those figures and go, where might be the value of a bootstrapped startup coming to Dublin? You will still have tons of much smaller meetups, and the idea is that you just get the platform to launch your product off and really engage with a lot of people who can take your business to the next level. So yeah, a couple of other figures. We've got 400 investors from 4 that we had in our first year, and the kind of evening events really show where we're going with the event. So a lot of people this year called us the South by Southwest of Europe, and it's something that I guess we've kind of embraced with the Night Summit, which had all the major acts in Ireland playing. Our artistic director Rob Farhat put that together, and it really became a music festival in its own right. We had the Food Summit, which was the biggest food event in Ireland. So the way we kind of built out our startup community year on year, in kind of no small way, has been down to the pub summits, which is, this year we've done 100 pub summits around the world. They're free networking events. We work with a local co-host. I think we actually worked with Beta I in Lisbon. So they're really just great opportunities for investors to meet startups and media and just everybody to get together. But more importantly for us, it's a great opportunity to kind of get feedback on our event and to see really what startups are looking for. I think, everybody on our team comes from a startup background. We're not necessarily events people. Our head of production is one of the best events people I've met, but we still, the rest of the team come from a very entrepreneurial background, and tech conferences is something that we felt just needs to be done, and we kind of need to do it in an entrepreneurial way rather than a production way. So these are our speakers that kind of really validate what we're trying to do. This year we had people like Elon Musk and Nicholas Zenstrom and Aaron Levy, but we also went a bit right of field that I think explorers do extremely well with. It's very hard to follow an astronaut on stage, but you have people like Tony Hawk there and Shane Smith, the creator of Vice. So I guess it kind of shows where we are in terms of conferences. Any conference on the West Coast would be doing pretty well to get all these guys on stage. So this is our main stage from this year. The 10 stages kind of replicates the diversity of the Web Summit. So, it's trying to replicate where Ireland has come in terms of, creating little hubs and structures for various kind of startup industries to break off into. And we try and do that with the Web Summit. So, it's essentially creating a developer stage, a digital marketing stage, areas where you can create highly targeted events and highly targeted networking, but also you have the broader spectrum of the summit as a general event. This is alpha, so I'll wrap up very quickly. I'm about to hit my time here, but so in the space of the last kind of 9 months, my team spoke to about 6,500 startups. From that 6,500, we had about 900 exhibiting. So it is by far the biggest startup event that I've ever come across, and Alpha represents 720 of those guys. We have Start Global, which is 150 of the best guys, all have raised in excess of $1 million, and they really are the 150 strongest startups that we've come across in the world. So I'll leave it for there. I think we can probably flesh out in our conversation afterwards, but I'll probably just hit my time there. So yeah.